I'm Anjan Srinivas. I'm a product manager with the View team, and I'm going to today talk about Windows 7, our favorite topic. So let me start with asking a question which I ask in a different way, the other way around. How many in the room will not be virtualizing or migrating to Windows 7 in the next 2 years in this room? Awesome, there is one person. One more than the last session. Awesome. I'm sure he has great reasons not to go there. He still have, after 2 years, he'll still have 2 more years to do that, so he's probably going to fall into that bucket. But I wanted to kind of use this talk to highlight some of the challenges that we'll go through in this huge migration wave that's going to happen. And if a lot of you who may have some memories of the migration that happened from 2000 to XP, this was a big investment for a lot of companies to go through. And I think those days, it was still, desktop operating systems were still evolving, and over the period of time, people have actually mastered the art of managing XPs now to a stage where they can quickly stand up, patch, update XP, and Windows 7 is going to bring a whole lot of uncertainty into this whole mix. So let's talk about what the challenges are. Let's talk about what it means to solve those problems and how VMware can help in that process. And what tools do you have to your discretion to use based on what you are trying to achieve in your environment and what your business requirements are. All the cool legal stuff that you have by heart by now. If you don't, you have one more day tomorrow to go attend sessions and get this by heart. If you all noticed with Paul in his keynote, what his vision is for the company, and this has been a big driver within the company for us since he has joined us about 2.5, 3 years ago, is driving this vision of a desktop virtualization environment which is independent of the devices, is more tied to the users, and it's all about applications. And that was very evident from some of the demos if you saw of Project Horizon. But eventually what the problem we are really trying to solve is this dilemma where IT wants complete control of their environment. They want it secure. They want complete control. They don't want users to be doing things that are not in code. And users today are the next generation users, even not even just because they are younger or anything. Almost all of us have these tools such as Skype and this collaboration and this new generation of Flex, nice looking content that you're so used to. You want to start consuming IT, especially desktops, with Apple having revolutionized the way you deal with devices. You want to start using these devices back in your enterprise. So what is happening is there is this friction between how much do I allow inside my enterprise without compromising on the security, without compromising on my policies, and make sure that I manage the SLAs, I manage these desktop environment well enough. And VMware and virtualization in general offers you technologies that can actually make your life simpler and not have to do this tug of war between this user requirements and the IT requirements. How many in this room are from the IT, and how many in this room are end users who are trying to think through this? For show of hands, IT. Whoa, all are IT. So let's forget about all the user requirements. Let's not worry about them for a minute, right? Let's worry all about control. Let's worry all about security. Let's worry all about manageability, right? It's your lives that are more important than the end user's happiness using their desktop. So let's focus on that here a little bit. But the journey to get there is not going to happen overnight. Desktop virtualization is a very emerging area. While desktop virtualization in the first step, when VMware came out with Workstation in 1999, I think it was the first step. People, were not really, very impressed because they didn't think there was a requirement to layer operating system or detach the operating system from the hardware. But today we see that basic tenet of detaching the operating system from the hardware has become such a huge enabler, not just in the desktop space, but also across how you develop applications and how you deploy clouds going forward. So the first step here is to modernize your desktop. The first step is to take progressive steps to the direction where you can actually do things that lead you up to that cloud journey. And to do that, you have to take a few steps, and we'll talk about some of those steps that you need to make. Once you have done that, within your enterprise, within your private cloud, you need to find a way to bridge those technologies out to the public cloud, and that's where the hybrid model starts to exist. And once you have been able to do the hybrid model, you can really then take this flexible access anywhere, anytime, follow the user, independent of the device, depending on whatever device you have, you'll be able to get your securely managed desktop environment that is provisioned by the IT possible, and that is going forward. So that's the vision the company is working against, but we today with Windows 7 have this great opportunity to take the right steps. If you don't do it today, you will be still left with the legacy way of migrations, legacy way of managing desktops, which will not lead you to this flexible way of doing compute, which probably is fine for a few people, for a few use cases that we will see that they'll continue to do physical desktops for a long time to come. They probably will never get down to virtualizing it. But that for a huge set of users, this offers immense value. And let's see what the challenge is and what the value is. Again, don't worry about the end user, it's all about the admin here. So what's driving the Windows 7 trigger here? I see this as an opportunity. A lot of desktop shops who have large farms of desktops no longer had the opportunity to rethink what they were doing. They just had to do it. They had a few desktop admins. They always were thinking about, how do I push out my next patch? How do I make sure the next patch does not break anything? How do I make sure the new malwares that are coming into the environment, that is secure? How do I provide secure access to my contractors who come in and come out every day? And that was keeping you busy. Just the plumbing business was just keeping you busy doing all this. But now, with this Windows 7 migration, you're forced. Microsoft does not leave you with any choice, because by 2014, they're going to stop support for XP. Of course, you can pay a premium, which probably is going to be in magnitude of thousands of dollars per quarter to keep the support alive for XP, but that's not something that your CIO or CFO is going to be very happy about. So they are going to force you to move to Windows 7 in the next 4 years. And people, that's why almost all of you are taking steps in that direction to start moving there. The infrastructure has been a concern. With the changes in economic conditions, people have waited too long sometimes. They have waited, whatever would take them a 3-year refresh cycle is now a 5th-year refresh cycle. People are still living with the really old laptops and desktops that have not been refreshed. And Windows 7 is not kind to those environments. It requires a newer PC and a beefy hardware. So Windows 7 has those requirements, and aging infrastructure does not help. So people and IT, if you look at IDC projections, they're expecting a huge surge of PC shipments in the next 2 years. And it's not just because of Windows 7, it's purely because people have delayed those things. And now it's going to come and they'll be forced to buy new hardware. And there are application vendors are slowly moving away either into a SaaS model, everybody's coming out with their own version of SaaS software, or they're going to be starting to invest in the Windows 7 model and they're going to stop supporting XP. There's smaller and smaller teams supporting your XP code. And for a lot of custom applications that you have, you probably don't even have the developer who wrote that. You don't even know where that media CD is, where that source code is, or it's just lost in transition, or some business unit owner has it, and you as an IT don't have good visibility into whatever happened with that piece of code. With all this, if you really see, if there was one other alternative operating system that could have taken Windows 7's place, I think at least 30% of the people in the room would have actually tried to use that. But the reality is, although we hear a lot of hype with Google saying Chrome OS is going to come out, and Ubuntu having a great run-up to making it much simpler for desktops to run Linux, it's still not enterprise ready. Also, it's not ready because the applications that you have been using so long are no longer going to work in that new environment. So till that bridge of applications that you absolutely must use to go over to Windows 7 or to the newer operating system happens, there is no alternative. We are locked in with Microsoft the way it is. And that's where we are forced to use that alternative of Windows 7 to go to the next platform. But I think with virtualization, there is a different way of going to Windows. There is a different way of consuming Windows. And it's sometimes ironical to say that we make Windows work better, right? So, but that's the reality. We are now presenting Windows in ways that Microsoft has not been able to do in the past. Clearly, the sentiment that's shared by you is also shared by our customers and the people we speak with, and people are looking to migrate this over the next few years, and they realize they have a very short window to do this. So what is the key to really doing this right? What should you as a business owner consider? Because your job is on the line if you don't do this right, if it turns out to be the wrong way, and whichever way wrong is being perceived by your department. Clearly, the vision of what you see is the desktop architecture for your environment has to align going forward. The solutions that you choose to migrate needs to be aligned to your vision of what you see, how you're delivering desktops and end computing to your end users going forward. The second most critical aspect which people tend to ignore, and this is mainly a technology conference. I know we are all very excited about technology, but what comes to haunt us is the cost aspect eventually, because if it does not make sense from a cost perspective, it just does not make sense. However cool the technology is, it does not matter. People start off with per user costs, which are just ridiculous. People start off with a couple of $100 per user, and they think they're going to be able to use that much of dollars to migrate those users. And in reality, migration is a much more expensive task than that. And I'll share some figures on how much does it really cost to migrate a user, especially when you have to buy a brand new PC, because all of this migration is now tied with PC refresh. So people are either going to buy new PCs and then use the same instance to use a physical machine in a Windows 7 environment, or they're going to use that physical machine money and going to buy new servers and storage and start to do VDI with Windows 7. So those are really the options that people will have when they want to do this. Also, it needs to be timely. There is just a bunch of legacy out there. There is a lot of custom applications. As I said, we don't even know the roots of where the source code came from. It really needs to be timely, given that we have a very small window. And some of these steps in the migration, which we'll talk about in the next few slides, are very, very, very time consuming. The solution needs to be complete. I think it's a no-brainer for us to really think through and say, yeah, does it give me an end-to-end solution? If not today, does that roadmap and the vision lead me to an end-to-end solution going forward? Can I live with some of the gaps today, but really does it give me that benefit going forward and really complete my solution overall? So let's take a recap of what really is involved with a migration planning. There are a few steps that you absolutely need to do. First is to audit and assess. This is, I think, the biggest challenge, not just for VDI deployments, but in any enterprise. A lot of folks think this is an easy task. They're just going to be able to pull off a few lists and they'll find out. In reality, most enterprises don't have a very cohesive list of all the applications that they have. What versions, what patches, what works, what are the caveats, what doesn't work. So there's this gap in data that you need to fill. And you can fill this in various different means, but I have also heard examples from some of our solution architects who go out, talk to customers and implement it for them, that people have to actually go through manual interviewing process with line of business chiefs and actually go through understanding from them what is sitting inside their desktops. So it's a huge cumbersome process. It's going to take you enough time. But again, there are now pretty good tools out there that can actually help you. Microsoft has one tool that while it's not the best in class out there, but it does the job. It can help you for a smaller deployment. But for larger deployments as well, there are a lot of tools that can actually help you audit and assess. So the other part of assessment is also understanding which applications that users were already running needs to be decommissioned, because some of them will no longer be supported. You bought this from some company that existed 5 years ago, but they went down. They're no longer there. So which application do you replace that with? So you have to really build an application strategy, and then you jump into the application compatibility and remediation. And that is, after you have done with the strategy, you build a plan, you work on that plan, and then go remediate your applications. This is going to be a long, time-consuming process. Gartner says it takes most enterprises having more than about 1,000 desktops, anywhere between 12 to 18 months to get done with that one phase. So it's a really long process. Again, as I said, it could be very, very costly. The custom applications, the cost of remediating custom applications, and if they have to be recoded, assume you have to just write new code for Windows 7, varies between $180,000 to $800,000 per application. This is Gartner number, so take it with a pinch of salt. But the fact is, even if it's on the lower end, it is expensive. If you do a couple of apps that need to be rewritten, you're already running into a couple of $1 million there. So that stage is going to be lengthy and expensive, even dollar-wise. Once you've done that, then you reach the decision point where you have to acquire hardware and software. And depending on what you choose VDI, you choose non-VDI, whatever is your choice of the platform, you're going to go acquire that. You are going to be left with, if you're going to use hardware PCs, you're going to be left with a heterogeneous environment where you have some from a certain vendor, some from another vendor. You have drivers, hardware issues with each of them. You have different driver levels on each of them, which virtualization takes away. So you got to understand that is something that you will have to live with. People I think have kind of mastered how to inject drivers and really make it work in some of these environments. But for you, if you're again going to start fresh, and you don't have those systems in place, that is something you need to consider. And then once you have this, then begins your testing cycle. You build your master images, you put the version of Windows 7, whatever flavor of Windows 7 that you choose. You inject the applications, make sure these applications don't conflict with each other. You inject the drivers, make sure it works on that piece of hardware, and then you test it. You make sure everything works fine. Then you go out and deploy it. You may have systems that cannot do it automatically. We'll talk about some of those challenges with those systems. But you may have it. Whatever way you find best to deploy it, you will. And then the application and the user data, which is the key, their documents, their settings, their whatever is needed to make them productive right from word go, it's needed to be restored back. And this is assuming, of course, you have captured the profiles that you needed to capture before you destroyed the older machines. So this is the life cycle that you'll have to actually take to migrate from the current state of XP physical machine to either a physical Windows 7 machine or a virtual Windows 7 machine. So we did some math. We went through a couple of Gartner models, added a pinch of salt, trimmed it down, brought it to a little more realistic, did more than 50 customer interviews. There's going to be a calculator as well on what we did on the website. We found that the cost per user to migrate is going to be anywhere between $1,250 to $3,000. And this is also adding the cost of the PC, which is about $700 plus SNS and whatever the cost, your negotiated cost is. So as you can tell, per user cost is pretty significant. And also this includes the cost of downtime. There are a lot of soft costs. We got to account for a lot of those things, which, hey, if I'm not in front of my PC for half a day and I'm not going to be working on my PC, there's a productivity loss, which most people will not understand. But I get paid enough to say it's really significant. When you start adding it up on a per user basis, it starts to add up. Maybe not all your users are in that range that add up significant costs, but that is a downtime that you need to absolutely consider and add those costs in. So let's understand what are these costs and just kind of give you a granular flavor to what you need to be looking at as business owners, going back and asking the right questions within your department to really understand how you're doing things. There is definitely software license cost, right? VDI or not, you still have a cost of Windows 7 and you still have application cost. When I say application cost, a lot of you will say, hey, I already have service level agreements with my vendors. I'll get a free update to the Windows 7 version of my off-the-shelf applications. I'm assuming there is a $0 cost there. You'll get it for free. I'm talking about the 30% of applications that are not, either that are not within the SA or they are custom apps that you have no vendor to actually go back and talk to. Or something that they don't support anymore, you have to rewrite, do whatever it takes to actually build those, get those applications. There is a cost of labor, and this is something that is like application packaging is not something that everybody can do. It needs some specialized skills. Not everybody can actually go figure out all the dependencies on the registry or different package and repackage it all by themselves. So you need people who are skilled, who have to be paid, decent amount of money to get through the application packaging, testing, and deployment. Again, depending on which model you choose for testing and building these applications and packaging it out, you will have different cost models, but I'm not going to go into every detail there. From a hardware perspective, you either have to buy brand new PCs or it's going to a VDI model. You could pick, I think with VMworld you saw multiple announcements where we said we have brought down the infrastructure cost to $250, right? Well, of course, it means that you have to go buy the same bill of material that somebody has specified in a reference architecture and actually build it the same way. But if you start to build your own, it's going to run out of steam. So you got to really understand what are those trade-offs. How much am I paying for server versus PC? But I think this is the most exciting part for me as a product manager for Windows 7 migration in the company. This is one opportunity where if you have to buy new PCs, you have to spend that money anyway. The CapEx equation becomes really simple. Because you're spending a lot of money, 1,000 users, 1,000 desktops, there's a lot of money already. You're spending $1 million just buying brand new PCs. So why don't you spend that dollars on the VDI infrastructure? It becomes a no-brainer. And then you start looking at, hey, is my physical desktop management easier than virtual desktops? And the answer is pretty obvious there. So you start to kind of then take away that CapEx discussion and move it over to OpEx really fast. And again, as I said, user downtime, time to deploy. Some people will argue with me saying, hey, my systems are so set up right and I can upgrade a machine in 15 minutes. Even before the user is done finishing his coffee break, I'm done upgrading his machine. It's not that simple, right? You make it look so simple because you want to feel good about it. But the fact is that, there will be machines that will not get upgraded by chance. So there are just a lot of factors and not everybody has a zero-touch model in place. It's not 15 minutes. It's not reality, right? I've worked for very large enterprises that have very well-managed IT systems, no complaints. But it takes more than 15 minutes to get an upgrade done. It depends on your network. Is it segmented right? Do you have enough bandwidth to push out thousands of desktops update all at the same time? There is just various factors that will go into really understanding if it is a completely automated system or not. And is there a time to deploy element that's there? And there are still companies small companies have to go from machine to machine and actually use a USB stick, back up the profiles, put in the media or whatever, or download the media from a file share and then do this manually from machine to machine. So you'll find a range of these customers, and that's why I hate to generalize anything. So again, great challenges. What's the solution, right? What do we do? How do we make it simpler? Our approach is, VMware's approach is to take this three-step process, make it a migration journey in our view, is to number one, of course, the audit and assessment does not change. You still have to do it VDI or not, right? Even with VDI, you may have to kind of look at a few other things before you jump into VDI. It's just good practice. But the step number one is to try to virtualize every application that you can do. So by doing that, you're doing two things. You're saving yourself from the pain of actually having to recode applications if there are. There are things like IE6 compatibility, which is a big talking point these days. By doing these kind of things, you will easily circumvent those problems. So number one is to do this. And there is some math around this. There is a calculator, depending on number of applications in your enterprise, you'll derive a certain amount of benefit. I won't go into why it is 40% and why it's not 47 or 27%, right? And step number two is to then use VDI to deliver desktops. So this is the VMware's migration journey in two steps. And by doing this, we believe you will save half the time and cost migrating because of all these steps that add up, and you'll eventually do it faster. Just to give you a sense of the labs that are running downstairs, there are about 600 desktops that were spun up in about 3 hours. And about 400 of those desktops are actually running from one data center in Florida. There's another data center in West Virginia, I believe. And there are 200 that is in a data center locally in San Francisco. So there are about 600 desktops, 700 desktops running there. They were all spun up all in a matter of few hours. So that is the level of deployment benefit that you will get by using something like this. And also VDI will clearly provide you the benefit as you kind of do this operationally. You'll be able to save on help desk calls, complexity in management, patch and update. And there are things that are improving on a daily basis here. There are vendors who are working on this. So clearly the benefit is twofold. One, during the migration journey, during the phase where you're actually migrating from XP machines to Windows 7 machines, you're saving a huge amount of cost in terms of time and money. But once you've done that, you've actually enabled your enterprise to deliver desktops from the cloud. You've taken steps to actually detach the operating system from applications, maybe applications from profiles, and now you have created a modular structure for your desktop that can actually take you further into this cloud journey as you go along and modernize your desktop. So let's talk about the steps here. Let's go into some more specifics of what you actually need to do to get this done. Step number one, I think it's the biggest challenge. People don't know how to start, where to start, which users to target, which users are the right use case for VDI, how many IOPS do I plan for, which storage do I use, which applications can I virtualize. I think that's the biggest one I get is, hey, great, VMware Thin App application virtualization story is great, but which applications do I choose and how do I start with them? We have two partners in this process. One is Liquidware Labs, one is Lakeside Software. I think they're both great partners for us, and we have many customers who have used them. By putting these appliances or data collectors within your environment and running them for 2 weeks, what you do is actually collect whatever is going on in your physical environment, actually physical desktops with your network. It will tell you how much of bandwidth was consumed, which application was invoked how many times, what was the reads and writes back to the hard drive in this case, if it is a physical machine or if it is a VDI XP environment, how many reads and writes happened, how many IOPS were consumed, what was the network latency. So it really goes through all of these parameters and gives you a data dump, which really makes things a lot clearer for you. Your design and architecture become a lot more superior. And when you hear some bad stories about, hey, I tried a VDI POC, it didn't work for me, it's purely because you didn't understand what you're trying to get done, and the architecture was flawed because you used metrics that were not measured. And these partners will help you do that. So what we have done is actually, if you're going to use or do a pilot ever, in the next 1 year, you're going to get the licenses for these software free. You're going to, because we have partnered with them, they're going to leave licenses behind with you. You can use them for free. It's just this data that is available to you free of cost. So definitely leverage that and make sure that you're using the right metrics. One more cool thing about this software, right? They actually go and do application verification. For the applications that they saw in your environment, they'll be able to spew out a list and say, this is a low-risk application virtualization candidate, which means that it is pretty easy. I've seen this before, I've done this before kind of a thing, right? I've seen this application can be virtualized. It'll also give you a medium-level risk application virtualization parameters. And there are high-risk ones. And when you say high-risk ones, what it really means is that this application is either dependent on a driver that needs to go back and talk to the hardware, or it has some decom calls. So basically, there are a few things that application virtualization still cannot solve. There are just things that it cannot handle yet, and it will give you a list of those things. So just don't try to virtualize these things, or maybe there is a one-off way only a specialist can help you with, but you cannot do it yourself because app packaging and virtual app packaging is not something that every enterprise is trained on and doesn't have competency on. So there are also things like App Factory that we are building, where actually you can submit the actual source code and the files, config files with it, and then we can help you package it as well. So use all of those things in the first step. The next step is to deal with applications. As I said, there are some central IT applications, there are line of business applications. There's just a huge list of applications you will get. Usually, and on average, there are more than 1,000 applications in a mid-sized enterprise. And while a desktop might have just 20 or 25 applications installed in it, overall for your finance department, for your HR department, each department has its own application requirements, and the list is huge. So explore application virtualization. Use it wherever you can, using the tools that you have been recommended, and clearly minimize on the XP mode. I think the Microsoft way of doing this is to do XP mode, right? And I think when you do that, you actually double the number of desktops you need to manage, because you're not only managing the Windows 7 environment, which is brand new for you, you're learning how to do it, and then there is an XP element which gets added on. So you never actually let go of the older operating system you're managing, and you're actually adding more to your work. So that's not good, clearly. And also, it means that your hardware requirements for running XP mode is also higher. So it's not recommended. Clearly keep that in mind. Also, there are a lot of web applications. I think if you saw this wave of web application development that happened, a lot of these applications were written for a specific browser. And it was IE6 in most of the cases. So I speak to a large financial customer last week. They have close to 2,500 applications that are tied only to IE6. And in those cases, it becomes a real pain for them to move to Windows 7 because still those applications can be resolved. There is no way they're going to go to move to Windows 7. So if you can virtualize IE6, it's a big unlock for you to move to Windows 7. That's a big, big stage, and I'll have a demo after I'm done talking. I'll show you how the IE6 works and how some of the cool features that we have implemented in ThinApp can really help you there. Again, budget enough time for applications. Clearly, you need to make sure that you realistically plan this because I had one customer walk up to me last after I finished talking. They had about 3,000 desktops and about 600 applications. His manager wanted a project plan in the next 2 days. And while he was in VMware, he said, you have enough time in the hotel room. Why don't you come up with a project plan and come up to me Monday, right? And it clearly shows that they have no clue on what they're trying to do. It's not a simple task to plan out all these things. A project plan is not built on just in a couple of days, not understanding what it is. I was trying to help him. He actually came on to the one-on-one sessions that we had. I was trying to help him on what applications do you have? Do you have categories of applications? They had not done any work on that, and they were trying to build a project plan. So just don't be unrealistic and really work with your ISVs. I think taking them into confidence, knowing what they're doing, where they're investing is going to be an important piece as well. I wanted to kind of also highlight why people use VMware ThinApp. There are a lot of application virtualization technologies, and we can work with any of your choice. But VMware has this asset within the company which is very powerful. The reason, I think one of just examples is application IE6 is developed by Microsoft. Microsoft also has AppV, but still today, they don't have a way to make IE6 work in a virtualized fashion, right? So it's just such a big company. Their right hand doesn't talk to the left hand. It's very hard for those architectures to be built right. And I think with our strategy, we have built a great architecture where there is absolutely no infrastructure required on the back end. You don't have to deploy any streaming servers. There are no agents within the guest OS. You don't have to install software to actually make this work. It plugs into any management interface. It's pretty seamless. The way you can do patch and update of your applications with this is really, really simple. If you haven't done this, I would urge you to go to the hands-on lab and try this out. It's really, really cool. And again, by actually putting each application in a bubble and separating out the conflicts, you are now reducing a whole amount of complexity in the desktop. Most of the complexities are because I installed Java version whatever and my SAP version client whatever does not work well with it. And somebody didn't catch it in the testing, but now suddenly somebody else said, hey, hit update, and the update killed some application. So really, by virtualizing these bubbles, you can make your desktop architecture much more cleaner, much more isolated. Clearly, as we see, it's going to help us in a big way in migration. I think I talked about some of the benefits while I was describing the features on the product. This is, I think, one big thing. IE6 is very easy to harvest. We have actually added a new feature, which I also demo called Thin Direct. What it really does is if you have an application and you are using IE8, and you have a website that you already know does not work, probably it's a link to your application on your intranet. So what you can do is pre-populate that in a actually Word file within the desktop, which you can even push out from a GPO perspective, keep it updated. And as soon as you type that link, the browser automatically spawns off an IE6 instance, which is a virtual IE6 instance. So what you now have is IE8 and IE6 running together. And you are now able to actually spawn off that new website using the IE6 browser. So maybe this is a good segue for me to just go in and show you that demo right here when you're actually listening to me talk about it. This is assuming my machine has not gone to sleep like last time. And so what you see on my screen here is an IE8 instance that is natively installed on Windows 7. So assume you have a website that does not work with IE8. So once you do that, you'll automatically see that there is we have captured what you typed in, and on the right-hand corner, you see a thin-apt version of IE6 being launched. And then once this is launched, if I had internet, it would be beautifully rendered on IE6. And how does this magic work? I'll just show you the file I was talking about where you actually specify all these websites. So I go into program files, I go into VMware, ThinApp, it's called ThinDirect. It's a text file sitting here. So as you see, I've populated the websites that may potentially not work. So I'm not being biased here. So what do you think? This is useful? This is cool for you? It's going to help you ease the migration pain? Show of fonts, yes. A lot of IE6 apps around. Okay, 50%. Cool. Okay, going back to the slideware. So going into the deployment challenges. So once you have this master image built, you have your applications done, you did it right, you used application virtualization either from VMware or from Microsoft, whichever ones you preferred. You now have a challenge of pushing these images down to the users. And if you were to do this, again, as I said, from a VMware perspective, it would be just a click of a button where you just spin up a few VMs, you have a master image, using link clones, you save a ton of storage space, you populate your couple of hundred machines in a matter of hours, and it's all ready to go. But most people today in the XP world don't have that. They're using, either have spent a lot of money putting zero-touch dollars in place, zero-touch models in place, and keeping up these models are very, very challenging. It's not usually that the IT department has so much of time to upkeep these zero-touch models, and it's just a very expensive proposition. And the reality is, most of these companies, 85% of the companies, enterprises out there, don't have such invested automated models in place. So it becomes very challenging to put this in place in a very short time, and it becomes like a big task for people to do this without these automated systems in place. So deploying OSS could be a time-consuming task. So what do you, basically at the high level, what do you really kind of keep your eye on is to make sure that you can meet your deadlines. Overall, custom XP support is going to be very, very, very expensive, so you definitely don't want to go there. So you have to finish your projects by 2014. You really have to understand the current IT model that you have. It's a light touch or a manual touch or a zero touch, whatever it may be. But also understand that the VDI model can actually work well within those models. You can actually use the same model to manage a VDI desktop versus a physical desktop. So you can actually integrate VDI into that. And making a business case just from Windows 7 features can be hard. Just people talk about Windows, Microsoft will actually talk about Windows 7 is a lot more productive and whatnot. But, hey, I like Windows 7. It's very fast. It works much better than Vista for sure. And it also feels better than XP. Has a lot of cool features, has integrated search, whatnot. But just making a business case from how much productivity you're going to gain by doing this is going to be very hard. So you don't want to go down that route, clearly. You definitely want to consider the new features that are in there. There are a ton of new features that have been built in. There are some defaults that you want to make sure that you can clean up before you really start doing this. There is an operating system fine-tuning guide that has been produced and been put on VMware.com. So if you really want to make it efficient for VDI environments, slim it down, thin it down, make it look healthy and run fast, you can really use that deployment guide. Also, one of my colleagues here, Anthony Puka, he did a session on design considerations for Windows 7 in the last couple of days. So if you did miss his session, please do go and check out all the considerations that he has given out. We have gone through what network adapters to use, how do you size your storage, how do you fine-tune the services that are not needed and take them off, make the machine slim, how do you use the GPO model to your favor. So there is a whole bunch of technical considerations that he has gone very much in depth. And we'll also be giving our partners the same education as well. So when you use any of the VMware desktop competency partners, they'll have the same skills and tools to actually help you with that information. So please leverage that. It was design considerations for migrating to Windows 7. That actually happened an hour before this one, which, it's just ironical. But you can always find the slides and video for that on VMworld.com in a couple of weeks. I see also understanding the VCD implications. A lot of you may already have SAs in place, so you don't have to pay the Microsoft tax anymore. They've made it simple. But if you don't have SA in place, it's a $100 cost per virtual desktop that you run in your environment. So just keep that in mind when you're doing it. You don't want to kind of rub Microsoft the wrong way. So what's the big message here? What's the high-level message, right? You really want to take the right way, not the wrong way, right? So if you really look, I don't say VDI is for every user, but it's for every company. So as long as you understand which users it makes most sense for, you use that and make your life a lot more simpler migrating. Once you've done that, next time Windows 8 is around, right, you don't have to go through the same pain of migration. You don't have to go through this whole forklift of your infrastructure and actually having to go this. It could be just a simple recompose. A lot of customers today are actually running XP in a VDI environment. For them, it will be just a VMware view recompose operation where they select all those desktops and point them to the new Windows 7 master image, and they're going to recompose themselves in a matter of hours if it is a couple of hundred machines, right? So it is really simple for them, for those who have adopted those models, and I have a lot of customers who are doing that. But again, this provides all of us an opportunity to really rethink our desktop strategy and pick on the right architecture. So again, if you're taking the right steps today in migration, you will find a way to get to the nirvana state where you really can make a seamless, flexible architecture come to life in your environment. So you definitely want to consider that going forward. This was the session DV7167 for those of you who want to make a note of it and go back to the slides that you may have. Anthony is still in the audience, so if anybody has any deeper technical questions that is beyond a marketing person's grasp, I'm happy to punt it to him and he can share his experiences with you. He has done a bunch of migrations already, and he's an expert in this field. So with that, thank you very much for coming. Have a great show, have a great party, and happy to take questions now.